So guys, what's up? How are you? Suggest collab fanfiction. So today we are gonna see what if Naruto was son of Gabriel in High School DxD movie. Love. It is considered to be a powerful force that can overcome many oppositions. It had seen many different individuals through hardships as well as be the cause of them. Not only is it a powerful force, but there are many different forms of love. The love for a lover, to have another being meld their lives with yours and see things through together. The love for your friends, to stand by their side and support them in any way you can. Then there is the love for family. This is the most diverse form of love. The love for a sibling will see you want to push them forward to reach happiness. The love of the parents, the ones that join together to create a new life and wishing to see that life strive to become better. There is one set of this love that can be seen as the most dedicated. The holy angel, Gabriel, a woman of unmatched beauty and is seen as the highest form of holy divinity in both appearance and persona. She was walking through the heavens with a look of concern on her face. She made her way to a high peak of one of the mountains that were scattered throughout heaven. She arrived and looked on at the everlasting light. Gabriel had something that no one had seen on her face in a very long time. She had a look of concern. For some time she had this bit of curiosity on something only the Almighty had, and this curiosity was what caused a slight of fear. This curiosity was still just that, curiosity, but if it remains, it could very well become envy or jealousy. And to feel this could very well cause her to fall. She came up here to clear her mind of this concern. She raised her hand to conjure up an orb of holy magic and merely held it there. This act was merely just to have something else to focus on, and the warmth she felt from the holy magic was soothing in a way. "What ails you so much to come up here, Gabriel?" Said woman continued to gaze at the orb in her hand as she smiled at the presence of her brother. "I am troubled, Michael." Michael walked up to stand by her as he looked on at the view. "And what are these troubles?" "I have a curiosity about something our father has done." "Oh, and why does this trouble you?" "I am curious about what he felt about it, and I fear that this curiosity could lead to jealousy." Michael was shocked to hear this coming from Gabriel, as it seemed impossible for her to ever come close to an act that would lead to falling, but he then thought that this fear might be a bit misplaced. Calming himself with this thought, he spoke. "You had said this is a curiosity you feared might lead to potentially falling, correct?" Gabriel gave a fearful look at Michael as she nodded. It hurt Michael to see Gabriel with that look of fear, so he chose to ease her worries. "Then you need not worry. Curiosity is not a sin, and if you are able to achieve the knowledge of this, then you should try and achieve it. Do not fear achieving this curiosity, just do not become obsessed with this. If you are unable to achieve this, then let it go. If you aren't able to achieve it, then it must not be something you are able to know." At hearing these words, Gabriel's fear faded as she nodded and smiled at him as she bowed. "Thank you, Michael." Standing straight once more, she unfurled her wings and flew off. Michael smiled as he watched her fly off to do what would be needed to relieve her curiosity. He then gained a bit of his own curiosity. What is it that she is curious about? I will have to ask her at a later date." With that, he turned to look at the view and smiled. "Good luck on your endeavor, Gabriel." Despite how she was given the go-ahead to sat her curiosity, she had no idea how she was to do it. She was sitting at the edge of a lake with her feet in the water as she pressed her finger on the side of her chin and looking up in thought. How would I even do it? We were never told how it was done. She didn't know how long she sat there trying to rack her brain on how to accomplish her objective, but after sitting there for so long, she chose to make an orb of magic and hold it in front of her before holding it in her arms. She stared at it as her mind still focused on what she wanted. She closed her eyes and hugged the orb of magic tighter as she stopped trying to think of how to achieve her goal and just thought about the end result. What would it be? Well, I think it would be cute to be a little pudgy giggle hair colored like mine and my blue eyes. Male. It would be nice if it was male. A smile that could lift the spirits of anyone. Maybe spiky hair. It's nice to be a little different. Don't want him to fully look like me. The thing she wanted to achieve was the creation of a child, a son to call her own. She thought about what he would look like if she were ever able to think of how to create one, though she did let her mind wander a bit. He would be so cute, like a kitty, and their cute whiskers giggle, and he would tilt his head like a kitty too, or maybe like a puppy. What she didn't know was that as she continued to think of the appearance of her son, the ball of magic that she held began to pulse in response to her desire. It had also begun to take in more of her magic, but it was such small amounts that it was unsensed by the angel. He would be adorable and I would love him unconditionally for all time. She suddenly felt the orb of magic in her arms began to change shape, and she opened her eyes in time to see the ball of magic lift out of her arms and float a few feet away from her. She stared in awe and confusion as she was unaware of what it was doing. Michael was going over some papers that dealt with a potential treaty with the devils and his brother's fallen angels. This was something that the three factions wanted to be done safely, as their numbers had dwindled and none of them wanted to lose any more. especially since the last war they had dealt a heavy blow to all of them. He froze when he felt a spike of holy magic somewhere in the angel's domain. The thing was, that at first, it felt like Gabriel's magic, but after a few seconds, it completely changed. What was a bit more shocking was that the level of magic was dramatically increasing. It felt like it was the level of a two-winged angel before jumping to the level of 4, then 6. Michael got up from his seat and rushed out of the room, and once he was outside, he spread his wings to fly off to where the magic was coming from. He would have teleported, but the feeling wasn't malicious nor did it feel like a fallen, so he did not have any real concern, rather he was curious. Gabriel was stunned as the orb of magic expanded slightly into a transparent orb showing something inside it. She walked up to it as the shape inside finally stopped morphing, and she held her hand up to hold onto the now transparent orb. She brought it up to her face and looked inside, and much to her shock, it was a baby, and not just any baby, but the one she thought of as she imagined what her son would look like. She brought the orb close to her chest and held it as the orb began to dissipate, letting the baby rest on her breasts. For minutes, Gabriel was stunned by what had just happened, but she suddenly felt a surge of love towards this little baby. She rubbed his cheeks and noticed that he had whiskers on each of his cheeks. Not really like an animal, but more like grooves that looked like whiskers. She smiled as she saw him snuggle into her breasts before he slowly opened his eyes, and she saw eyes so brilliantly blue that no one else could compare. My little baby. My little miracle. She held him to her chest as she gently kissed his forehead, and it felt like she was blessing her child and being blessed that this baby was her little miracle. She swayed back and forth as she held him, and now, her curiosity was sated. She now knew the love between a mother and their child. Unfortunately, there was an unforeseen variable of this creation: the baby was born mortal. And there was a magic spell in the heavens that took effect. Gabriel was stunned when her son began to glow brilliantly that she had to close her eyes. She felt her baby lift from her grasp, and despite her attempts to hold onto him, she couldn't, as a good amount of her magic was poured into the creation of the baby. She felt him leave her arms, and she opened her eyes to see the baby reaching out to her, and she did the same. She released her wings to attempt to fly after him, but she didn't even have the energy to do so. She reached as far as she could as her fingers barely touched the tip of his before he was suddenly teleported away. No. Gabriel looked around frantically as if trying to spot him anywhere, but she was not able to find him. This was what Michael arrived at, and he grew extremely worried when he saw a distraught look on her face. Gabriel. What is it? What happened? He looked around to see if he could find the source of the new spike in holy magic. One thing that was odd about it was that as he got closer to the location, the large amount of power began to drop before disappearing altogether. Not seeing what it could have been, he moved to be in front of Gabriel, and he gently held her by the shoulders. Gabriel looked up at Michael as tears came to her eyes. Seeing Gabriel cry was something that did not sit well with Michael, and he again asked her what was wrong. She mumbled something that was so quiet that he couldn't hear her. What? Gabriel let out a small sob as she said, he's gone. Michael hugged her and held her close as she cried for the first time since their father's passing. He would later get the answer to what occurred, and he was shocked to hear that Gabriel had sired a son in such a way. He gathered a search party to find the miracle son of Gabriel, but it would be some time till they find him. On the day the baby disappeared, he ended up in the mortal world on a tragic day for a certain village, a village that was in the middle of a battle against a large 9-tailed fox. Bhuvan Nagaraj, D. Glad you like the first chapter. I hope I am able to continue to keep your attention. Thank you for your compliments. Unsen Musho. Yes, it will be in the Narutoverse, Rolarolada. I looked up Trihexa and I see it is a manga-exclusive monster. My knowledge of the DxD series is the anime series, but I will look up more info on Trihexa and see if I can make it work. Naruto Reader 750. Well, see a Tengachak. Well, see Stormbringer 080302. It's one of the reasons I made this FIC. Wanted to switch it up a bit, so instead of Naruto in the worlds of DxD, have him be in a world that is a fusion of both. Not sure if it'll give him a sacred gear, but we will see. As for pairing, it is still in the air. Justin Ventus keeping it up. Minato and Jiraiya had no idea what was going on. One minute they were discussing making preparations for Kushina, and the next they are being attacked by the Kyuubi. This caused Minato to panic, not only because of the large beast attacking the village but also what this meant for Kushina. Eyes forward, kid, we've got a Kyuubi to deal with. Minato refocused on the battle ahead of him. Both he and his sensei bit their thumbs before going through and sings and calling out. Summoning Jutsu, Jiraiya summoned Gamabunta while Minato summoned Gamaken. There was no time for pleasantries as they had to stop the Kyuubi from destroying Konoha. Gamabunta charged at the fox with his blade poised to stab in its center, but the sword was swatted aside by one tail. forcing the toad boss to lose balance and was open to the second tail swipe that hit him across the face, sending him barreling into Konoha. Gamaken used this chance to shield bash into the fox, causing it to fall on its side. Gamaken jumped into the air and brought down his weapon to strike at the fox's head, but said beast rolled out of the way. Gamaken brought his shield up in time to block the tail swipe, but the force of it sent the shield out of his grasp and into the air. While still stunned, he was hit in the stomach by another tail and was sent colliding with Gamabunta. Minato was able to jump off Gamaken and went through the summoning jutsu again. Out of the large smoke came Gamahiro as he charged forward with his blades prepped. He swung his blades at the fox, but each of his strikes were countered by the tails. He soon found that both of his blades were caught by two of the tails while another one wrapped around his waist. He was then lifted in the air before being brought down hard into the ground. Minato was sent flying from the top of the toad, but he threw one of his tri-pronged kunai to the ground before flashing to it and rolling to a stop. Stopping on his feet, he looked at the beast and his eyes widened as he saw it open its mouth with energy gathering between its maw. Not having time to throw a kunai for him to teleport to, he instead threw one as far as he could out of the village and held up another one in front of him. He had to make this quick as he had nothing else to use. Bracing his feet, he saw the blast aimed at him, and he used the seal on his kunai to teleport the blast to where his other kunai was. A beam of light could be seen shooting upward, just outside the village walls. Minato grit his teeth as the attack kept coming. He felt his feet dig small trenches as he was being pushed back, but he did not falter. Odama Rasengan. The Kyuubi was hit by a large Rasengan, courtesy of Jiraiya. Minato fell to his knee when the attack ended and he looked up to see Jiraiya land next to him and in sage mode with Fukasaku and Shima fused to his shoulders. Thanks for that. Glad to be of help, Minato boy. Jiraiya nodded but kept his serious demeanor. Don't thank me yet, kid, it's still ready for a fight. The Kyuubi got back to its feet and glared at the two men, but before it could do anything, it was suddenly hit in the side of the head by something. Both men and toads were a little stunned at the new arrival, with the white-haired man calling out, "Tsunade?" Said woman landed next to the two as she glared at Minato and Jiraiya. Mind telling me what the hell is happening here? Minato took a deep breath as he began. I would like to know that myself, wasn't. Look out. All three jumped out of the way of a tail smash, grateful to the toad sage's warning. The second Tsunade landed. She went through hand signs and summoned Katsuya. She landed on top of the slug. Don't know how, but we have the Kyuubi to deal with. Can I ask you for help, Katsuya? Of course, my lady. The slug spat out a stream of acid at the face, catching it on the side and forcing it to jump away from the slug. She then made her way towards the fox, but in an instant, she split into her much smaller forms as a beam of energy was sent flying at them. Tsunade dropped to the ground before she ran towards the fox. Having the opportunity as the fox finished its attack, she jumped into the air and sent a powered-up fist into its snout. The Kyuubi glared at the woman and was about to strike, but Odama Rasengan. It was hit from both sides by two large Rasengan from Minato and Jiraiya, with both now in sage mode. Once the attack stopped, Gamaken tackled it from the front, getting it to be in the pathway of Gamabunta's blade. The blade made a large gash on its side, but it didn't have the chance to collect itself since Gamhiro dropped down on top of it while in a sitting position, picking up a large puff of smoke. Minato, Jiraiya, and Tsunade stood there and waited for any sign of movement to see if the fight would keep going. They got their answer when Gamahiro was lifted into the air and Hen slammed hard enough to be poofed away. Gamabunta didn't have time to react since a paw came out of the smoke and hit him hard enough that he also was sent back to the summons realm. The Kyuubi turned to face Gamaken, but before it could attack, it felt something crawling up its legs. Looking down, it saw that the small slugs were crawling up. It began to steam as the slugs began to secrete acid on it. In anger, it spun around fast enough to send the slugs off. Gamaken used this chance to swing his weapon at it, but his attack was interrupted when one of the tails hit him in the face and ending his time in the fight as he was also sent back to the summons realm. The three grit their teeth as they lost the best fighting summons they had, but they weren't going to just quit. They tensed at the glare they received from the fox. Minato tried to think of anything he could do to stop the Kyuubi, but he kept coming up blank, and the only one that would work was sealing. The issue was that there was nothing he seal it in. Sealing one of the other tailed beasts inside an item was possible, but the Kyuubi was too powerful and the item they eel it in would shatter almost instantly, and the only one that could hold the Kyuubi was an Uzumaki or an infant. An Uzumaki could do it because their naturally large chakra coils could handle the power, and an infant could because as the coils developed, the power of the Biju would force them to develop faster and more in tune with the chakra. This thought brought a sense of sadness, as this meant that as of now, the last of the Uzumaki was now dead, and with it, his wife and child. It was then that a loud boom was heard and everyone looked to where it came from. They soon had to cover their eyes as a blinding white light lit up the sky as if it was a star. The light could be seen for miles as if a beacon to all of those who were looking. The light soon began to die down and the people there finally got a look at what it was. To their surprise, they saw it was a baby and they couldn't understand how the baby appeared out of nowhere. The baby was still enveloped in bright light as it slowly descended to the ground about a couple of dozen feet away from the shinobi. Their attention was then brought back to the fight as they heard the rumbling movements of the Kyuubi. Minato's mind was still trying to find a solution to this issue before his gaze went straight to the baby that was now laying on the ground. He knew the idea was completely unethical and would be seen as a monstrous act, but at the moment, they were out of options. Sorry for being the Hokage. In an instant he ran to the baby and picked him up before jumping closer to the fox who he could tell was stunned. The two Sannin looked shocked at what Minato was doing before they chased after him. They didn't have to go far till they saw Minato going through hand seals. Jiraiya already could tell what jutsu Minato was about to do. What the hell are you doing, kid? Minato finished the hand signs as he summoned an altar. The only way I can think of to stop the Kyuubi. Tsunade figured out what had happened and she was furious. The hell is wrong with you? You don't even know whose kid that is and you plan on ruining his life the instant you see him. Got a better idea? The two Sannin were stunned silent as this was the first time they had ever seen Minato look both furious and hurt. Minato knew that what he was doing was not within his right. He had no idea where this baby came from or who it belonged to, but to save the lives of the villagers, he would need to damn his soul to save them. He made one last hand sign and summoned the Shinigami as he was prepared to do the Reaper death seal. The Shinigami cut open its stomach with the dagger in its mouth before reaching out and into Minato and pulled out the Mon's soul that was tethered still to the body. Once in its grasp, it sent out an ethereal hand towards the Kyuubi as commanded. The Kyuubi shook its head as if in a daze before looking around and not recognizing the area. What? Where am I? It didn't have time to figure this out as it felt something grab onto it and it began to feel all its body being compressed and warped until it was tugged towards a certain spot. Minato continued the sealing as he felt the incredible strain on his soul since he was sealing the entire Kyuubi into the baby. He watched as the beast was sealed inside the baby and once it was done, he saw a seal appear on the baby's stomach. I am sorry. He felt the last tug against his soul from the Shinigami and knew that he only had a minute till he would die. He fell to his knees as he felt all his energy leaving him. Tsunade and Jiraiya ran up to him with the Slug Princess using her medical jutsu to try and keep him alive. You idiot. You could have come up with something else to do other than the damn Reaper death seal. Minato smiled tiredly at her, didn't have time to think of something else. Jiraiya had moved over to the baby and was surprised that the baby was sleeping peacefully as if nothing had just happened. He brought the baby over to them and knelt down. This was probably the dumbest thing you ever did, kid. He sighed tiredly and had a look of defeat as he looked to Minato. What do we do with him? Minato looked at the baby and grimaced. Find his parents. Explain to them what I had to do and make sure that they understand that it is still their son. This is to be kept secret from everyone. I don't want this baby to suffer the life I had forced on him. He winced as he felt the life in him leaving. He was able to last this long because of Tsunade, but he knew he was running out of time. He thought about the leadership of the village and knew that if he doesn't assign someone to take his place, another individual would take up the title of Hokage and he didn't want that man to have that kind of power. I am also reinstating Hiruzen as the Hokage till he finds a suitable replacement. He would have given the job to one of the Sannin, but he was wary of what Jiraiya might do with that power. He also knew that Jiraiya would work better as their spy master. Tsunade wouldn't want the job since she still held onto the baggage of Dan and Nawaka's dream. Tsunade glared at no one in particular as she heard this. Where is that old monkey anyway? Making sure that I was okay. The group looked over to the side to see not only Hiruzen Sarutobi but also a pregnant Kushina Uzumaki. Minato looked like he had just seen a ghost since he was sure that she was dead from the Kyuubi being extracted from her. Kushina? How? Kushina stormed her way towards her husband before she grabbed him by the collar. Minato. What the hell were you thinking? Using the Reaper death seal on a random baby? Did you steal him from someone? Whose baby is it? Despite the anger that was easily seen in the woman's eyes, the rest of them could see that it was just a mask to hide the sadness she had knowing he was dying. Hiruzen walked up to the two Sannin and spoke. Kushina was with me all this time as my wife Bawako was tending to her. He said this to Jiraiya since the man was as shocked to see Kushina alive and well as Tsunade was visiting Kushina when the attack started. Tsunade looked to Hiruzen with a frustrated look. We could have used you in the fight earlier. Hiruzen nodded before he looked at the redhead who was now just holding Minato. We had to make sure that Kushina remained safe. She is very vulnerable and with the attack from that Kyuubi, We were not sure what else would happen if Kushina Beast was released as well. Jiraiya's mind was putting the pieces together as he looked at the couple. Now that I think about it, the Kyuubi we fought did look different from the one in records, but that can't be right. There should only be one like the other tailed beasts. Hiruzen rubbed his chin in thought, but he had no answer. This was something that would have to be looked at in detail. I have no answer for you, but we need to look into this as we do not know why this Kyuubi attacked. For all we know, someone may have been able to create a pseudo-biju, but that is just a theory. The three then went silent as they watched Kushina cry over Minato as the man was close to the end. Kushina had Minato's head in her lap as she cried over her dying husband. You really are an idiot, Minato. Minato smiled as he couldn't argue that fact. Maybe, but I was yours. Kushina shook her head. Do you know how cheesy that sounded? Minato gave a small shrug, too tired to think of something better. Kushina smiled as she ran her hand on his cheek and decided to be a bit chaste as well. Then get some rest. I'll wake you when I can. Please don't. Let me sleep in. Kushina cried silently as she knew that Minato was no longer with them. The three older shinobi lowered their heads at the loss of their Hokage. October 9th was the day that Minato saved the village from the Kyuubi. Hiruzen looked at the baby in Jiraiya's arms and asked, might I ask where this baby came from? I know for a fact that Minato would not just steal a random baby for this. Jiraiya explained how the baby came out of nowhere in a bright flash of light and that Minato had ordered them to find the parents and explain the whole situation. Once it was done, the Toad Sage watched as Hiruzen thought about the possible parents in the village. Jiraiya then chose to tell him, and he also reinstated you as the Hokage till you find someone who can take your place. Hiruzen stiffened at this before all the color left him as an aura of depression fell on him. I thought I was free. Elsewhere, a man walked away from Konoha as he thought about what had just happened, so it appears T was not able to destroy the village. A red Sharingan eye glowed from the eyehole of the orange mask the man wore. Pity. We are going to catch you. You can't get away. A girl that had red hair that was tied into a small ponytail that barely reached her shoulders, turned around and smiled as she was keeping away from her pursuers. She kept running till she got to a tree and she climbed up to stay away. Bleg. You can't get me. She looked down to the ground before she leaned back on the trunk of the tree. Hey. That isn't fair. The girl looked down and giggled as she knew she was safe. It's called tag for a reason. One of the kids that were looking up at the girl pouted before stomping his foot on the ground. But we can't climb like you can. The girl smiled at them before she began to climb down. Mama showed me how to do it. One of the other kids pouted as they looked away. Well, we don't know, so no climbing trees. Kasumi nodded okay. She then began to run away with the kids chasing her as they started their game again. Meanwhile, on a bench in the playground the other kids were playing it. A young spiky-haired blonde was watching the kids play with a smile on his face. He watched them run by till he looked upward and held out his hand as a bird landed on his finger. He brought the bird closer and gently pet its head as the bird lowered itself on his finger and closed its eyes as it was close to falling asleep. It wasn't the only bird he had, as there was one on his shoulder, one in his hair, and one on his lap. As he pet the bird in his hand he began to hum a gentle tune that caused the kids that were playing to pause in their playing and look over at him. For minutes, the kids were watching the boy hum this tune and they closed their eyes as they began to sway back and forth in rhythm with his hums. If the kids kept their eyes open, they would have seen the boy begin to give off a slight glow. Once the humming was done the kids opened their eyes with the red-haired girl walking up to him. Where did you learn that hum, Naruto? Naruto looked at the red-haired girl and smiled. I made it up, Kasumi. Kasumi smiled at him before she felt her shoulder be tapped. Tag. You're out. Kasumi wilted at the fact that she was tagged out. She moved to the bench and sat next to Naruto. She watched as the other kids chose another one to be chased before they began to run off in the playground. Kasumi pouted at how she had to sit out of the game since she was tagged out. She turned her head to see Naruto enjoying himself with the birds that seemed to keep landing on him. Why do the birds like you so much? Naruto smiled at her as he held a bird in front of her face. Pet it. Kasumi smiled wide at this and gently pet the pretty bird. She beamed at the happy chirp the bird did. Naruto, Kasumi. The Hokage wishes to see you. Both kids looked over their shoulders to see Neko waiting for them. Both kids smiled as they jumped off the bench and walked up to her. Naruto waved the birds goodbye as he walked towards the woman. Once the two were with the Anbu, the three began to walk towards the Hokage tower. As the three made their way, many of the civilians paused and looked at them before giving a greeting to them. Neko kept her eye out for anyone that would cause these kids harm, but no one in the village showed any sign of negativity towards them. But she would always be on guard, especially since it was leaked out that Naruto was the holder of the Kyuubi 4 years ago, a mere week after the two were born. Despite the investigation on who let out Naruto being the holder of the Kyuubi, they weren't able to find who it was, but fortunately, the rumor of Naruto being the reincarnation of the Biju was quickly squashed by a very furious mother. It was the rumored gathering mob that forced Kushina to show her status as the real Jinchuriki of the Biju, as she used the beast's power to scare the ever-living shit out of all of them. Thankfully, the only one that was hurt from this gathering was the one that started it, and Naruto was blissfully unaware of this, as both he and Kasumi were being babysat by a silver-haired Anbu. Kushina made sure everyone knew that she still held the beast and the seal was not broken or going to be broken anytime soon. It took some time till people finally understood the boy had nothing to do with the Biju. Despite how this was a lie, Kushina knew this, but she was not going to have a child live the life of a Jinchuriki since she knew how the other villages treated them. She was spared this since it was kept secret from the populace thanks to her husband. Neko was grateful for this since Naruto was a very sweet boy and Kasumi was just as sweet. Neither of them deserved any of the harshness Jinchuriki had. To prove this point, Naruto had stopped and ran over to an ally before he picked up a little cat that was laying there. Hey! Naruto looked at the little cat in his arms and began to gently pet it as the cat nuzzled into his chest. The cat was one that he had run into many times when he was outside in the village. He figured it was a stray cat since it didn't have a collar and no one ever claimed to be her owner. He had tried to keep her at his place, but she never stayed for long since she always goes off on her own and she wouldn't come back till he found her again. Naruto was okay with this since she would always come over to visit now and again, and despite how she didn't stay long, he had a spot meant for her when she does visit, and not just her. What are you doing here? And where is? Meow. Naruto looked further into the alley to see a larger, older, black cat walking up to him. He smiled as he knelt to pet the black cat as well while cradling the smaller cat in his arm. I knew you wouldn't be far away. You never let your little sister go off on her own. Kasumi walked up to be by Naruto's side as she scratched under the black cat's chin as both of them purred. Ah. I want to take you home with me, but Mama said I am not old enough to take in a pet. Naruto smiled as he looked at the kitty in his arms and brought up a finger to her face, and H smiled as the little kitty grabbed the finger and gently nibbled on the tip. Neko stood a few feet away as she watched the two children play with the stray cats. She knew that they had to get to the tower in regards to the summon, but this little distraction wasn't going to hurt them at all and the Hokage could wait a few more seconds. After a few more minutes of the kids playing with the cats, they let them go off and do whatever it was that cats do when they were out on their own. Naruto and Kasumi rejoined Neko and began to continue their trek to the tower with Naruto waving bye to the cats with a large smile on his face. See you later. Both cats sat there and watched as Naruto, Kasumi, and Neko walked off and did what they wanted to do. After the humans were out of sight, the cats went back into the alley and off to do their thing. It didn't take long till they arrived at the front desk of the Hokage tower with the receptionist looking up from her work and seeing who it was. The woman nodded and gestured for them to go ahead. The three made their way to the Hokage office in order to see what the Hokage had called them for. I hate this job. Now, you should hate it. It is an honorable job that helps the civilians and shinobi inside it with financial needs and keeps the peace running in the village as the said shinobi protect the people. Inside the Hokage office were Hiruzen and Kushina, as one of them was trying to keep the peace while the other was tempted to wage war on the mountain of paperwork that sat on the desk. Don't make me kill you, old man. You only have the guts to say that cause you aren't the one in this damn seat anymore. That's right. Hiruzen Sarutobi is no longer the Hokage of Konoha. That job now belongs squarely to Kushina Uzumaki, the Godem Hokage. After the tragic event of Minato losing his life by sealing away the Kyuubi into Naruto, Hiruzen had respected the Mon's wishes by taking up the title of Hokage again in order to keep the title and power out of the hands of someone who would abuse its power and potentially lead the village to war. He had also tried to keep the boy's status a secret from everyone, but after the leak, he had found himself swamped by mountains of bureaucratic crap that came his way. The man knew that he couldn't be the one to do it since he was well past his prime, and he was sure that he would not be able to do a good job at it, and so after a year of doing his best at this, he began to run through potential successors. At one point the highest suitor was Tsunade, but the woman did not want to take the job since she felt it wasn't her right to have the job that her younger brother Nawaki and her lover Dan fought so hard to achieve, only for it to be taken away from them so abruptly. Respecting the woman's wishes, he tried to think of who else. The next candidate was Kakashi, but the man was more useful in the Anbu and had his own issues to deal with. One of the Uchiha could take up the mantle, but with the strain that the clan had with the Hokage at the time, it would have been unwise since at the time he was trying to mend relations with them. It was then that the best choice almost slapped him in the face when he was in a meeting with the council and Kushina had taken charge of it and told the civilian side that all of their petty requests needed to be put on hold since they were still repairing the damages from the attack. Honestly, Hiruzen should have figured it out sooner, especially since this woman had once said that she would be the first female Hokage ever, and when Minato was in the seat, she would help him out with her own opinions on the matter. And so, Hiruzen had named her his successor, while also keeping the headache of paperwork a secret since he knew that Minato played the paperwork off as light work whenever Kushina was around. The man may have done it to ease her worry about him, but this came to be used against her. Was it petty and selfish? Hiruzen would just ask, "What did you say?" "Sorry. Old age can be a hindrance sometimes." Kushina sighed as she placed the paperwork down as she was really tempted to rip it to pieces, but she knew that Naruto and Kasumi were on their way and being angry right northwest would not help things. On cue, there was a knock on the door and Kushina allowed the person to come in. Once the door opened, a woman with long black hair, onyx eyes, and a long black dress. Kushina smiled as she looked at who it was. "Makoto. I wasn't expecting you." Makoto smiled at her as she responded, "It wouldn't be a surprise if you were expecting me. I see you are as busy as ever." Kushina leaned her whole body on the desk as she looked up at her friend in depression. "Yeah, and the old monkey won't let me do it the easy way." Makoto turned her gaze to the old man that was sitting on the couch, smoking his pipe nonchalantly, and looking away from the two women. "Oh. And how exactly is he holding you hostage?" "You mean apart from the job?" Both women giggled at the joke, but Kushina went back to the question. "He says that Ichiraku Ramen owes him a favor and that he can cash it in, barring me and my family from eating there for a week unless I do this without the trick that he wished he knew in his term as Hokage." Makoto narrowed her eyes at the old man. "That is a little petty and unfair, Hiruzen." Hiruzen just responded nonchalantly, "We are shinobi, nothing we do is fair." "Says the man that tries to make everything in the village fair," was Kushina's quick remark. Knock knock. Kushina lifted her body off the desk, looked at the old man, which told him that he needed to put away his pipe, and once seeing that he did, she called out, "Enter." This time when the door opened, Neko came in with both Kasumi and Naruto running up to the desk, which brought a smile to the red-haired woman's face. "Mama." The younger redhead ran around the desk and jumped onto her mother's lap, almost causing the small pile of paperwork to fall over. "Easy, Kasumi, don't want to make work harder for Mama, do you?" Kasumi shook her head and smiled at her mother. Kushina looked up to see Naruto smiling at her and she returned the smile. "How are you doing, Naruto?" Naruto bowed to her as he responded, "I am doing fine, Lady Hokage." Kushina sighed as she gave him a slightly stern look. "Naruto, how many times have I told you that you can call me Kushina?" Naruto just continued to smile as he said, "I had lost count, Lady Kushina." Makoto and Hiruzen laughed at the deadpan look Kushina gave the boy and couldn't tell if the boy was doing it intentionally or he was just that well behaved at such a young age. She looked at the boy and couldn't help but interlay sigh in defeat as she had to tell him the results of their search. "Naruto, you know that we have been searching for your parents all this time, right?" Seeing the boy nod, she continued, "I am sorry to say that despite how we had searched throughout the entire village, there is no one that is able to claim you as their child." This was something that both Hiruzen and Kushina had been doing on the side ever since the day of the attack. They had searched through civilians, clans, and even people that only came into the village recently, but no one had lost a baby. The first clan they went through was the Yamanaka clan since Naruto had bright blonde hair, but no luck on that end. They even went to the clan head and almost teasingly said that Naruto might be Inoichi's illegitimate child. It was humorous to see the calm and collected Noriko Yamanaka interrogate the man while holding on to their recently born daughter Ino. Baby girl didn't even wake up from her nap. Once they went through the Yamanaka clan, they went through the rest of the clans but with just as much luck. After their search, they went through hospital records and tried to find out through bloodwork to see if there was a potential lead there, but no one on record had any match, not even the ones found dead from the attack. Kushina had gotten the very last report on the last person in the village, but it came back negative. "I am sorry to say that after all of our searching, we haven't been able to find any of your relatives in the village or ones that came through the village during the time of your birth." Once she said these words, she expected him to become saddened or disheartened by them, but she saw that he just gave her a reassuring smile. The rest of the adults in the room were just as surprised, as this isn't the kind of news that a child would take so easily. Naruto looked to the adults and bowed to them. "Thank you for your attempts at finding my parents, but I am not saddened to hear that they are not in the village." Makoto stepped forward and knelt to be at eye level with the boy and placed her hands on his shoulders. "Naruto, you don't need to hide your feelings about this, you can talk to us." Naruto shook his head at the woman. I am not hiding anything, Lady Makoto. I truly am thankful that you tried to find them, and despite how you couldn't, I feel it in my heart that I will see them again. Hiruzen got up and joined Makoto. How are you able to tell, Naruto? Naruto looked out the window towards the clouds and smiled. I just know. I feel it in my heart that I will see them again. The adults looked at each other with the same quizzical look. Kasumi got off her mother's lap and walked around and hugged Naruto with a big smile. I know you will, Naruto, but till then you can keep being our neighbor. This was another thing that Kushina wanted to do for the boy. At first, she had him living with her in her house, and that was how it went for 4 years. But on the 4th year, Naruto had said that he should be living on his own and not being a burden to the family that was not his own. In fact, the adults didn't know how he knew that Kushina wasn't his mother, since they had kept quiet about it, but it was because of this that they told the boy that they had tried to search for his real parents, but they didn't tell him because if they couldn't find anything then he would just be a permanent resident of the Uzumaki family. He even took their last name. He said that he should live on his own and learn to be self-dependent so as to not cause any trouble for Kushina and Kasumi. The woman was adamant that this was not necessary since there was no problem with him living with her, but the argument kept going and Kushina found her will against the boy weakening. He just had a way of convincing people about something he believed in, and the bright, happy, reassuring smile he had just broke her, but she made a compromise. She would allow him to live on his own, but he would be living in the house next to hers, with no gate between the two, and a pathway that lead from the side entrance of her house to his. He would also get an Anbu guard to protect him if anything were to happen, and she would visit him every day and invite him to dinner. So in the end, he was still living with them, just a few dozen feet away. Kasumi was crying when she was told that he wouldn't be living with them anymore, but she was happy when she heard that he was only moving next door. Kushina even made sure that it had enough security seals that could label it the safest place in the village, apart from her own home. Naruto looked to the leader of the village and bowed. Thank you again for trying your best, Lady Kushina, but please, don't worry about me too much. I am going to worry about you no matter what you say, and I am going to get you to call me just Kushina one of these days. Everyone laughed at this before Naruto asked, may I be excused? Kushina nodded. You may. Naruto bowed to all the adults before walking out for the room. Hey, Naruto. Wait for me. Kasumi ran after the boy as she wanted to hang out with him more. Neko looked to the Hokage and bowed. I will take my leave as well. Kushina nodded. Make sure Kasumi doesn't cause too much trouble. I don't know how much of me she inherited. Neko nodded and used a shunshine to follow the children. Kushina sighed as she leaned back in her chair. Sometimes that boy is more mature than any 4-year-old should be. Makoto nodded in agreement before she turned to her friend. Speaking of 4-year-old, I should get back to mine so Itachi and Fugaku can get a break. Kushina nodded as she looked at Makoto. Don't forget to tell that man that we have a council meeting coming up about the village that has been hounding our borders for some time. The village she referred to was one that had no real affiliation with any of the major shinobi villages. Despite this, they had many warriors that were skilled in the use of chakra. So much so that they tend to use abilities that shinobi have never seen before. The village kept to themselves and didn't let anyone within their borders, but 4 years ago, many of their agents were found scouting near Konoha, and despite the many attempts to communicate with them, they only scowled at them in contempt before disappearing from sight. Konoha didn't want to antagonize them as this was the first contact they had with them, but relations seemed to already be bad. Kushina for the life of her didn't know why. Makoto nodded before she left the room. Kushina looked out the window to the streets to see her daughter and Naruto run off. She then turned to the photo of her husband and gave a saddened smile. If it weren't for the fact that I saw you have that baby in your arms and I gave birth to our daughter, you could almost think he was our child. Hiruzen walked up to stand next to her and nodded. It is true that there are some similarities, namely the hairstyle, but his hair color is slightly brighter and the marks are an interesting feature. Mito was not seen with such a thing, and you yourself show no signs of the fox's influence, apart from when you are furious and your hair reminds me of the Kyuubi's tales. Konoha streets. Kasumi was dragging Naruto around the shopping district as she wanted to see if there was anything new that she could get with the little bit of money she had. She dragged him into a bookstore and they moved over to books about shinobi. Kasumi loved to read and she loved reading about the cool stories about shinobi heroes, though she was always led to the fantasy stories about shinobi as the real-life shinobi stories were a little much for someone her age. This did not deter her from her growing desire to become a kunoichi. As they were going through the aisles, Naruto accidentally bumped into someone, causing the person to fall over. Naruto grew worried and looked down to see it was a girl with long black hair. He saw that she was slightly older than him and he reached out a hand to help her up. Are you okay? The girl looked up at the hand before she followed the arm to the one that owned it. She stared into his eyes as something about him seemed odd. The girl couldn't place her finger on it, but there was almost a kinship with the boy, despite never meeting him before. The kind act was not something she would ignore. Yes, I am. Thank you. She took his hand and was helped up to her feet. She then looked down on the boy as it was obvious he was younger than her, probably by a few years. Feeling a bit mischievous, she brought her hand up and rubbed his whiskers. She giggled at his embarrassed face. Ah, is little Kit Typkin embarrassed? Naruto didn't know how to react to that, as no one had ever really touched his whiskers before, at least not that he could remember. Can you stop please? The girl giggled as she pulled her hand back. Kasumi puffed out her cheeks as she hugged Naruto closer to her as if he was a teddy bear and was about to be taken away. The childish glare Kasumi was giving the older girl just screamed out the words mine. The older girl giggled again at the cute sight of these two younger kids in front of her. Before she could say anything, someone called out. Akeno. I found it. Naruto, Kasumi, and the girl now named Akeno looked over to where the voice was coming from to see another girl walking up to them. This girl had long crimson-red hair that reached the middle of her back. Kasumi looked at the girl in wonder as her mind thought about the hair the other girl had. When the new GR came closer, she asked, "Are you an Uzumaki?" The new girl paused at the random question and looked at the two younger kids that were in front of Akeno. But the second her eyes landed on the boy, her body froze. She didn't know why, but something about the boy did not sit well with her. It wasn't that he came off as intimidating. He was only a child, but it was just his very being that caused her own being to reject his own. Kasumi tilted her head at how the girl seemed to freeze. Hello? The new girl shook her head at this and registered the question that the younger redhead asked. Sorry, no, my name is Rias Gremory. Kasumi titled her head to the other side. Gremory? Akeno giggled at the slight mispronunciation of her friend's name. Well, Rias Gremory, it seems you were mistaken for an Uzumaki. Rias glared at Akeno before looking back at the two younger ones. She still felt weary about the boy and she wasn't sure why. It is pronounced Gremory, and what is your name? Kasumi smiled wide as she introduced herself. I am Kasumi Uzumaki, and this is Naruto Uzumaki. Rias figured that they were siblings based on the name despite how they looked different. Well, it was nice to meet you too, but Akeno and I need to head out as someone is waiting for us. Kasumi nodded as she also wanted to go off and do her own thing since she came here for a reason. Okay, it was nice meeting you, Akeno, Rias. She then looked down at the boy that was still in her grasp. Come on, Naruto. I still want to get one of the storybooks so Mama can read it to me. She then dragged the boy away to her destination. Naruto waved bye to the two older girls as he was unable to say anything since Kasumi had an arm around his mouth. Once the two younger kids were gone, Akeno looked to her friend. Something wrong, Rias? Rias kept her gaze in the direction the Uzumaki duo disappeared to. That boy. Something was off about him. Akeno gave a quizzical look to where Rias was looking and asked, Are you sure? I had a different feeling about him. After a bit more thought, she looked at her friend again. Maybe you sensed something that could help you with your little bird problem? Rias gave an angry pout at the reminder of her sudden engagement to a pompous brat that saw himself better than anyone around, but she shook her head. No, if it was that I would be more inclined to get to know the boy. No. What I felt was telling me that I should stay away from him. I don't know why, though. Akeno looked to Rias and said, Maybe we should ask Sona, she knows more than we do, or maybe your brother. Rias grimaced slightly as she knew that if she went to her brother, he would smother her before ever hearing her out. I think we should just stay away from him. Now come on. I want to buy this volume so I can read it later. Akeno looked at what Rias had in her grasp and smiled at the manga she had found. The two then moved to purchase it before they would teleport back to the underworld. That night, Naruto was now on the balcony of his room looking up at the setting sun and smiled at how the wind was blowing gently on his face. He had eaten dinner with Kushina and Kasumi as the younger redhead went off about the book she found at the bookstore about a kunoichi that found love in a rival clan and they became the heroes of the land. Naruto got a fantasy book that had many magical creatures in it. Both of them got a discount from the older man that manned the counter as he enjoyed seeing their bright smiles when they came in. Kasumi was ecstatic that she got a discount that she went to get a snack to go along with the book. Kushina smiled as she read stories to them and how Kasumi said she wanted to be just like the kunoichi in the one she got. After dinner and story time, Naruto walked through the garden and into his house with Kasumi crying that he was leaving. She even said that she would come over right after she brushed her teeth. Too bad that after she brushed her teeth, she wanted to hear the story again and forgot about her promise to come over. Kushina remembered that she was like that when she was younger. Naruto closed his eyes as he took in a deep breath and began to hum a melody that was heard by all those walking through the streets. he didn't even realize a few birds began to land around him as they enjoyed the tune. So focused on enjoying his humming, he was gaining a slight glow. After he finished his tune, he opened his eyes to see that he was no longer in his room. He looked around at the unfamiliar setting till he looked forward and saw that there was a stone stairway. Curious, he began to walk up the stairs and under the red Shinto shrines that hovered the stairway. After walking for an unknown amount of time, Naruto made it to the top of the stairway and saw that he made it to a large temple that was decorated in such beautiful architecture. Feeling compelled to see what was inside, he walked down the stone pathway and into the structure. Once he was inside, he paused as he saw a beautiful woman sitting in the center of the large room in a seiza position. The young woman was one with a voluptuous figure, delicate facial features, long shining blonde hair and eyes that shined just as brightly. Her eyebrows are cut very short and round as if a symbol of nobility. Her hair is usually tied in a loose ponytail, reaching all the way down to her legs that end in a spiral, with taut bandages to keep it in place, and a golden crown resting on top of her head. She wore a traditional shrine maiden attire, with a white coat over that was held closed by a red ribbon. But the things that were most surprising to Naruto were the 9 fluffy foxtails that were behind her and the fox ears that could be seen peeking out from the top of the crown. Naruto was brought out of his shock when the woman spoke in a voice that was gentle and kind. "Hello, Naruto, it is wonderful to finally meet with you at last." End of chapter. A part of me feels like I made them a bit too mature for their young age, but it is what it is. So several meetings happened in this chapter and things are moving forward. Now, something that was brought up in a review that I feel I should clear up on my viewpoint was Naruto's birthing and creation. Yes, his birthday is one day before canon. This was on purpose. I am not sure why it matters since events are going to change throughout the story. Then again, this isn't canon. Naruto, Kushina and Minato are not his parents. Kushina instead gave birth to a daughter that has her looks. I pulled Kasumi out of another of my fics, the Naruto Digimon crossover. Naruto, heir of the digital catalyst. Naruto will be a bit OOC, but there will be canon characteristics that will bleed into him. As some readers might not have noticed, I did not give away Sasuke's gender. The reason for this was because I got a PM saying I should make Sasuke female and a few on my Discord server said I should too. Honestly, I don't really care which way I go since Sasuke in this story won't be the arrogant ass that many other stories have him as. It's more fun if he does have a few brooding moments but not to the point of emo. In other words, I won't be bashing anyone in the FIC, maybe a bit of pranking, torture, but that's about it, except Razor. He is generally annoyingly arrogant in the canon and I hate him, Mizuki too. Now the reason that Rias was wary of Naruto was because, if you think about it, Naruto is holy magic given form. He is kinda a holy spear that is sentient, which is an interesting way to see it really. As for Akano saying kun, I just put that there is more for teasing. I won't be adding the suffixes since it caused me a headache in some of my previous fics. Now I got a few people saying I should give Naruto Diedrich or Albion. I will say that after some thought I have come up with an idea for them that will be shown later on. Also, Naruto will meet his mother soon, just to stop that question from being asked. Naruto tilted his head when he saw the woman sitting in front of him. He wasn't sure if he met the woman before since he was sure he would remember meeting someone like her, but he couldn't think of when. But how would she be able to know his name otherwise? The woman smiled at the confused look the boy had as she could guess why he was confused. "Naruto, please come sit with me. We have much to talk about and I have a very grand favor I must ask of you." Naruto didn't see anything wrong with this and moved closer to her so he could sit next to her. As he got closer to the spot, he let out a small yelp of surprise when he felt himself being picked up and placed on the woman's lap. He felt himself being wrapped up in a pair of her fluffy tails and was now snuggly enveloped in a fluffy cocoon with his head pressed into her breasts. He looked up in confusion as he saw that the gentle smile she had on her face was now one of fond sadness. Is something wrong? The woman brought up her hand and gently cupped his cheek. She stared at him for a few moments before she shook her head. "We can discuss that later, Naruto. Just allow me this little pleasure." Naruto didn't know why the woman wanted to do this, but he figured that it wouldn't hurt if he just let her do this as he enjoyed this little comfort. He closed his eyes as he enjoyed this. After a few minutes, she began to speak. "To answer a question I am sure you have. The reason I know your name is due to how I have watched you for all your life. I have seen your first steps, I have heard your first words, and heard you sing every time you were at the park." Naruto tilted his head still in confusion. "But who are you?" The woman smiled as she ran her hand through his hair. "My name is Yasaka. I am the leader of a group of people that live separately from the great shinobi villages." Despite how this young boy was so innocent and would not do anything to cause her to distrust her, it was that very innocence that kept her from telling him that she was the leader of the yokai faction. The faction needed to stay hidden from the general public. Naruto smiled up at her and said, "So you are just like Lady Kushina. You look after her village to keep them all safe and happy." It was then that he remembered his manners. "Well, it is nice to meet you, Lady Yusaka. I am Naruto Uzumaki." He knew that Yusaka knew who he was, but it was polite to fully introduce himself. He then asked what he wanted to know. "So, Lady Yusaka, where are we?" Yusaka smiled as she knew that she would not be able to get him to just call her Yusaka. Kushina had been trying for a long time and still had little to no success. She looked around the room and spoke. "We are currently inside your mindscape, a representation of how your mind is structured. However, with how free-spirited you are, it has allowed me to change the scenery into something more familiar to me. Forgive me for doing something like this with something that is yours." Naruto shook his head. "No, it's fine. If you are more comfortable with it looking like this, then I am not mad. But if this is my mindscape, how did you get here?" Yusaka sighed before she explained. "On a certain night 4 years ago, I had gone through something that had put me in an extremely vulnerable state. Due to some internal conflicts within my territory, it was recommended that we have this done in a secret location. Unfortunately, it wasn't as secret as I would have liked. Somehow an intruder was given the location and in my vulnerable state. He had put me in an illusion. I believe you call it genjutsu. I thought that I was in a foreign land with enemies all around me, and so I defended myself. It was as if I was in a haze and couldn't see clearly. But when I came to, I was in the process of being sealed by who I saw to be the leader, the fourth Hokage." She looked down to the wide eyes of the boy as she finished. "I am the Kyuubi that attacked your village 4 years ago." Naruto had heard of the attack and how many people saw the Kyuubi as an evil creature, but Yusaka was the exact opposite of what an evil creature would be like. She was beautiful, gentle, and from the way she was holding him, caring, but Yusaka pressed a finger to his lips and smiled. "Yes. I know how the people of the village see me, but I cannot fault them for such thoughts. It is only natural that people would see me as such from how I attacked them." She moved her hand back to his hair and ran her fingers through it. "You are such a kind and pure-hearted boy, and I am blessed to have watched you these past 4 years, but there is something that I need you to do for me, something I have wanted for as long as I have been here." Naruto nodded his head as looked up at her. Yusaka brought her hand from his hair to her neck on a red collar that was tight around her throat. Naruto finally noticed the collar and tilted his head. Now that he focused on it, he felt something odd about it. "This collar is what is keeping me sealed within you. As long as this collar remains, I cannot leave your body and return to my home, and I wish to be free to return." Naruto could hear the desperation and sadness in her voice. He didn't like it when people were sad, and he gained a determined look, which on the face of a 4-year-old, is rather adorable. "What can I do?" Yusaka lowered her hand and smiled. "I am unversed in your shinobi's fuinjutsu. I was hoping that as the one I am sealed in, you would be able to remove it from me and I would be free to go home." Naruto wasn't sure if he would be able to remove it since he had seen Kushina use fuinjutsu, or seals, before, and it was confusing and hard to keep up, but he would do his best to help Yusaka. He reached up to see if he could unlatch it or something so she would be free. "Wait." Both Yusaka and Naruto jumped at the sudden voice that came from the entrance of the temple. They turned and saw who it was. Naruto had seen the man before in pictures in Kushina's home and even in the Hokage office. He knew who it was as he tilted his head as he was sure he was told that he wasn't around anymore. It was Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage. Minato walked up to the two and bowed. "I am sorry to interrupt, but I needed to stop Naruto from releasing you before I explain something." Yusaka narrowed her eyes on the man. She did not like the implication that he was trying to keep her sealed, away from her home. Why are you so against my release?" Minato stood up and sighed. "I heard what you and Naruto discussed, and I believe that the sincerity you had is genuine. The problem with your release is that normally when a biju is sealed in someone, if it is ever released or removed, the Jinchuriki would end up dying from the strain." He wasn't going to sugarcoat it since it was too important to these two to be hidden away. Yusaka held Naruto tighter as if the very thought would cause the boy harm. She was unaware of this and thought that if the seal used to keep her here was removed, she would be able to leave, but learning that her release would end with Naruto's death was something she was not willing to do. Despite what awaited her back home, the death of such an innocent child was too tragic. Minato could see the understanding in the woman's eyes. "That is why I stopped you. If there was a way for your release back to your people without causing Naruto to die, then I would tell you, but..." He sat down cross-legged and bowed. "I ask for your forgiveness for what I had done to the two of you. It was an act of desperation that I sealed you into Naruto when he suddenly appeared out of nowhere." Yusaka still was not pleased with being sealed, but as a leader of her people, she understood that such acts would have to be done. "Is there no way for my release without bringing harm to Naruto?" Minato sat up straight as he looked up at the ceiling of the temple. Normally, there would be no way of releasing you without causing Naruto to die. But this is much different from the Biju we know of. He looked at Yusaka and continued, you are not one of the 9 Biju that we of the shinobi villages know of, and the original Kyuubi, as I have seen through Naruto, is still sealed inside my wife. As such, I don't know the effects of what your release would do to him. He looked around the temple as if seeing something the others did not, and the seal isn't working the way I originally thought it would. Yusaka tilted her head as she didn't know what the seal was even meant to do, and with how he said that there were variables that differ from the original way this was done, gave her a bit of hope that there might be a way. Originally the seal was meant to convert Biju chakra into his own chakra, but your chakra is different from both Niju and Shinobi chakra. The seal is converting some of your chakra into his, but a good amount of it is leaking from his body, though I am not sure what it is doing once it leaves, but I would guess that it just dissipates. Yusaka thought about what this would mean, and the only thing she could think of would be that the chakra that leaves would be detected by her people, like a beacon, and the ones out there searching for her would lock onto Naruto as he is where it is leaking from. This could be a problem for the boy, as the ones out to look for her would most likely think that Naruto had done something to her. This was something that she wanted to avoid for Naruto's sake. With how just a small amount of chakra is being converted, in thought, it might be possible to release you and he would not have that much stress done to Naruto. But this is just a theory, and I don't think it is worth the risk for a child to try and handle the strain. While the adults were talking, Naruto paid only a bit of attention to the discussion. He kept his focus on the collar on Yusaka's neck. As he focused on it, he began to feel something negative about it. He didn't know what it was, but he knew that he didn't like the feeling. He unconsciously pulled out his right hand from his furry cocoon and reached out to touch the collar. He gently pressed a few fingers on the collar and then shut his eyes as a blinding light shined from the contact point. Minato and Yusaka were brought out of their conversation when the whole room was enveloped in light and they covered their eyes. When the light disappeared, they opened their eyes and looked at where it came from. They were both shocked at what they saw. The collar around Yusaka's neck disintegrated into light particles. Minato looked up and could feel it. The seal is gone. He looked down at his hands in wonder. But how? He couldn't understand how he was still here since the chakra used to construct him was tied to the seal. Wait. How did the seal even break? Yusaka, on the other hand, pressed her hand on her neck and could feel the collar was gone. She felt immense relief from not only no longer being sealed in here, but she could feel her power was no longer restricted, and with this, she could feel a way to leave Naruto and return home. She then looked down at the boy who was smiling up at her. Naruto smiled as he saw that the collar was no longer on her. He didn't know what happened, but he was glad that she was no longer being held captive. I am glad that you got it off. Yusaka looked at him curiously and asked Naruto how. Naruto tilted his head cutely and asked huh. Yusaka shook her head and thought about the feeling she got when the seal was removed. It almost felt like holy magic. Despite how she had been with Naruto all this time, she was unaware of Naruto's true origin. As far as she knew, he was just an orphan that was taken in by Kushina and Kasumi. She had also hoped that he would find his parents, but was just as saddened as the others were when Kushina gave the info about not being able to find his parents, and this was the first time she had felt any power come from him, but she was expecting to feel the different form of chakra these shinobi use, not holy magic that can be felt by angels and fallen angels. Minato was still thinking about why he was still here, but after a bit of focus, he could tell that the chakra that made him up was no longer tied to the seal, but that did not mean he would be able to last indefinitely. He had a small finite amount of time, and anything he did that used chakra would drain it. He thought about what he could do with the amount of time given to him and figured that he might as well use it for a selfish reason. But that can wait for now. He looked at the two other blondes and spoke. Well, with the seal gone, you have nothing holding you here, Yusaka, but I must stress that you don't leave just yet. We don't know if it is safe for Naruto if you do, and I think it would be best if it wasn't done in the village. When I sealed you, you were in your fox form, and despite the clear differences between the Kyuubi and yourself, people will still panic and it could cause some damage to the buildings if you come out as a fox. Yusaka could understand his view of things. Even if we go along with me leaving him, we cannot allow him to do it alone. If harm comes to him, then we need someone to keep him alive. She thought about what could be done for Naruto. The freedom she had wanted is now within her grasp, and she was so close to going back to what she missed, but she would not allow Naruto to die for her own selfish needs, even if the need was great. I wish I could leave immediately, but I believe I can wait a bit longer before I take my leave, as I wish to think of a way to save the boy from anything strainful. Said boy grabbed the adult's attention with a yawn as he felt tired from the late hour and the action he did. Both adults looked at the boy and smiled fondly. They both figured that it was late for the boy, and Yusaka figured that a boy using holy magic at his age would tire him out. Naruto tried to keep his eyes open, but he soon found himself falling asleep. the draining of his energy from what he did to the collar and the comforting cocoon he was in were the key factors that led to him falling asleep. Once Naruto fell asleep, he disappeared from the mindscape, leaving the two adults behind. Once he was gone, Yusaka unfurled her tails from where Naruto was and let them rejoin the clothes behind her. She looked at Minato with a stern look. How long are you able to last with what chakra you have? Minato was surprised that she was able to tell that his time was limited but chose to be honest. If I don't use any of it, I could last about a week. Yusaka nodded as she stood up with Minato doing the same. Now that Naruto is no longer here, I wish to make one thing clear with you. She unleashed a bit of her power in order to show how angry she was. Despite how I understand why you did what you did, that does not mean that I forgive you for doing something that kept me away from my home. I left behind something that I had been looking forward to for some time. Now that I have a chance of freedom, I hope to gain what I was denied. Even though I know that you are just a chakra construct of the original Minato, I still want you to know that I am furious with you. Minato felt small by the amount of power she was releasing. He may have faced off against armies in Yusaka in fox form. That was with him at full power and with smart thinking. Right now he was nowhere near full strength and he knew that he was at the mercy of this woman. Yusaka took a deep breath and brought back her power. She continued to look hard at the man. With what time you have, I want you to think of a possible way of my release without much harm to Naruto. That isn't even the least you could do, but it will help. Minato felt his curiosity peak as he wanted to know, what did I deny you back at your home? Yusaka felt her heart hurt at the thought. Despite how her face did not lose her stern look, she felt tears run down her face. My newborn daughter. Real world. Very little time had passed in the real world compared to the time Naruto spent in the mindscape. Naruto was still sitting in the spot he went into his mind, but now that he was asleep, he began to fall back, but before he hit the ground, a hand appeared and pressed on his back. Easy. Naruto. Kushina smiled at how the boy had fallen asleep while sitting on the balcony. She came in only a minute ago and saw that he had fallen asleep while humming. She then looked into the room as she smiled. Looks like I beat you in catching him. You are losing your touch, Neiko. Should I be worried? Out of the shadows came Neiko as she was Naruto's guard. She usually did her job from the building across the street or in the tree just next to the house. Forgive me, Lady Hokage. I suppose that I need to improve my training. Kushina smiled as she picked up the boy and brought him to his bed. You are always so serious, Neiko. She tucked Naruto into his bed before she moved to Neiko. But still, thank you for guarding him, even though many think that he doesn't need as much security. Neiko shook her head, with how some still hold negative feelings toward the boy. I do not see an issue with this job, and Inu, find this job enjoyable as well. Kushina sighed as she shook her head, most likely because he sees it as an excuse to read those pieces of trash. Neiko nodded as she could see Kakashi doing that. Forgetting those thoughts, she looked towards the Hokage. You should head to bed soon, Lady Hokage. Don't forget that you have a meeting with the clan heads in the morning. Kushina wanted to cry as she didn't want to wake up early for a meeting, but there were important matters that needed to be discussed, namely the agents from the secluded village that are roaming the forests around the village walls. Not only that, but there was a representative coming from Kumo tomorrow as well. Things just keep piling up. She looked at Neiko and begrudgingly nodded. Fine. I hope you look over the two tomorrow again. I need a vacation. Neiko nodded as she watched Kushina walk towards the bedroom door. Have a nice night, Lady Hokage. Kushina smiled back at Neiko. Good night, Yugo. She then looked at the sleeping boy in the bed. Good night, Naruto. With that, Kushina left and Neiko continued her duty of watching over the boy. Next morning, Hokage office. The meeting had been going like many other meetings before, but the shinobi were all thinking of what to do with the agents that had been showing up around their village. Kushina listened to all the thoughts the shinobi side of the council had. The civilian council had no purpose in this meeting, so they weren't called. The civilian council was only brought in if the meeting had a general purpose, but this meeting dealt with the village's security, and as such, only the shinobi were called. Some of the clan heads said that they should force the agents away from the village as this could be seen as spying on the village. Amazingly, Fugaku brought up an idea that no one thought would come from the man. Perhaps we should meet with these agents and make contact with their village. This is the first time we have seen agents from their village. We could create an alliance with them if we can meet with their leader. This stunned all of the others there as they all stared at him. Fugaku didn't look at anyone as all eyes bored into his skull and he just looked at the ceiling. It was then that Kushina smiled as she said, Makoto was the one that suggested that to you, wasn't it? The man didn't give an answer as he chose to continue to look at the ceiling. The other heads chuckled at this as it was funny to see a very prideful man fall to the whims of his wife. Kushina then got back to the thing at hand. Regardless of which way we interact with them, We need to up security for the village walls. Based on how they are moving, it can be seen as hostile, but until we know for sure, we should not antagonize them. Shikaku sighed as he had to agree with the Hokage. These meetups with the agents had been going on for a long time and the shinobi had been having this discussion just as long, but they had not attacked or done anything negative with their shinobi. They needed to talk with them, but that is becoming very difficult. I'll send a message to the shinobi patrolling the wall to keep a stern eye on what goes on beyond. We should even send some more shinobi to join them. Better safe than sorry. The other shinobi nodded before Hiashi brought up another matter that was happening. Now, we should also discuss about the representatives from Kumo coming later today. Who are we sending to greet them? Kushina leaned back in her chair as she thought about who would be the best choice to be with her when they greeted the men coming to discuss alliances between the two villages. Outside the village, hidden deep in the forest were a group of people covered entirely from head to toe, hiding their gender. They made sure that no one was around before they began to discuss the matter that had been on their mind for a long time. You all felt it. We now know that we need to get into that village and be silent. Of course, we all felt it, but this is a shinobi village. We may be the best in stealth, but to enter a village full of shinobi would be tantamount to suicide. If we want any sort of success, we need to be smart about this. We need a way in. We need to be patient. We have been patient. For years we have been patient and we have kept matters from escalating this long. It is only the will of Amaterasu that we have done so. But from what we felt happened last night, we now have a better chance of getting in, finding her, and then getting out. Very well. The second we all have a way in, we will take it and then complete our mission. How is she doing? Excited and looking forward to meeting at long last. Let's not disappoint her. Agreed. Later, at the park, Kasumi and Naruto were at the swings as they both kept going as high as they could, which wasn't that high. Both were laughing as they loved the swings. As they continued to play, Naruto suddenly stopped swinging as he turned his head to the side. Kasumi stopped as well and looked at him in confusion. Naruto? Naruto continued to look to the side as he focused on the sound. After a second he figured what it was. It was crying. He got off the swing and ran towards the sound with Kasumi following him. He ran through the trees and then came into a clearing to see a group of other kids surrounding two girls, one of which was defending the one that was crying. Naruto frowned as he saw a girl with purple hair push down the one standing up to her and he was not going to take this anymore. Hey! Leave them alone. The girl with purple hair and the other kids behind her looked over to the one that yelled. They saw two new kids coming their way and scoffed. Oh great, more losers. Naruto moved to the two girls that were on the ground and stretched out his hands for them to take. You two okay? The one that was standing up for the two grabbed the hand and got up before nodding. Yeah, I am. The girl that was crying was looking at the ground and sniffles could be heard as she had her hands covering her forehead. Naruto frowned at this and knelt to look at her. You okay? The girl didn't say anything as she curled up even more. Kasumi didn't like seeing this and gave an angry look at the girl with purple hair. Why were you being mean? The girl scoffed. It's not mean if it's true. She has a big forehead that no one will be her friend. She wasn't able to continue when she felt something hit her in the face. Kasumi didn't like this girl. She was being mean for no reason other than because she wanted to be. Kasumi jumped on top of the purple-haired girl and began to bring her tiny fists down on her. The other kids were about to jump in to help, but the girl that defended the crying girl stepped up and joined the fight. While this was happening, Naruto was looking at the crying girl and began to pet her hair. As he did this he began to hum his tune in a way to calm her down. The girl heard the hums and the hand on her head and began to feel her sadness wilt away. As she heard the humming, she closed her eyes and enjoyed the moment. After a minute of this, she looked up to the smiling face of a boy she had never seen before. Better. The girl timidly nodded. Kasumi and the other girl got up from where they pushed down the bullies as they watched said bullies scramble back before they ran away. They then turned back and saw Naruto comforting the no longer crying girl. The one that was defending the crying girl moved forward and knelt down with Naruto before she pulled out a red handkerchief and then wrapped it around the crying girl's head, making it into a ribbon. She smiled at her and said, "Don't listen to them. You are pretty and I want to be your friend." Really? Naruto brought up his hand to join in on this. Me too. Kasumi raised her arms as she excitedly said, "I'll be your friend too." The sadness now fully left as she smiled at all of them. She then nodded and got to her feet. Naruto smiled at the two and then realized something. Oh, I am Naruto Uzumaki. Nice to meet you. Kasumi stood next to him as she introduced herself. I am Kasumi Uzumaki. The defending girl puffed out her chest and put her hands on her hips as she proudly stated, I am Ino Yamanaka. She turned to the other girl and held her hand up for her to take. The girl that was running her fingers on the ribbon with her hand smiled as she stepped forward and took Ino's hand. I am Sakura Haruno. The kids began to play at the playground, unaware of a man watching them. Or rather watching the male of the group, blonde spiky hair, whiskers and that spike of holy magic that appeared in this village last night. The man smirked at the sight and leaned back on the side of the building he was standing next to. After all this time, I guess I found him. Better inform my brother about this. He then pulled out a small green book and began to read. After I find out what Kazuki and Aoi do in the bedroom. Next day, late night, Naruto was sleeping peacefully in his bed as he had spent the whole day playing with Kasumi, Ino, and Sakura. The two girls became quick friends with Kasumi and Naruto as they began to play tag around the park and went through the playground. Naruto smiled in his sleep at the idea of making new friends. As this was happening, Neko was standing on the rooftop of the building next to Naruto's house with a clear view of Naruto's room. She looked around to see several other Anbu guarding both Naruto's home and the Hokage's. Kushina had yet to return as she still had some late-night work she had to do, so it was up to Neko to make sure the kids got to bed. Normally people would complain about how an Anbu should have to babysit, but it is the best part of this job. Behind her mask, she smiled fondly at how she saw the kids sleep peacefully. Neko was brought out of her thoughts when she felt chakra spikes all over the village. She spun around and looked to the village as she focused on her senses. She looked to the other Anbu to see that they noticed the same thing. The chakra spikes were pulsating in a very specific manner. It was the alert from the other agents saying that an emergency had happened and they all needed to be on alert. Another Anbu landed in front of Neko and bowed. Captain. Neko nodded to the man. Report. What is going on? The man stood straight and gave her the details. Captain. The Hyuga heiress has been kidnapped from her compound and all shinobi are to be on the search for her and her captor. This was a shock to her as she found it hard to believe that the heiress was kidnapped in the compound of one of the prestigious clans. She thought about this and knew that she would be needed for this. She turned back to the house before she gestured to 8 specific members before gesturing that they were to guard the houses. Seeing them nod to her, she looked to the others and they all jumped away in order to find the one that had kidnapped the heiress. Meanwhile, the group of people outside the walls of Konoha saw that the wall guards had left their post in order to do something, and the group thought that this was the best chance they could get. Let's go. The group of people ran up the wall and into the village as they followed their senses towards their target. They looked around to see that the shinobi of the village were all in an uproar as they headed towards a certain part of the village which was away from where they needed to go. They thought it was the best chance they had and they would not fail this mission. After some time of following their senses, they came upon a specific house that they saw had a group of people guarding it. They saw that the one they were looking for was inside a room that had an open window, much to their fortune. Seeing the guards, a few of them moved around the guards and made noise to grab their attention. In the split second they had, one of them jumped into the room, grabbed the boy inside the room, and they could feel that the one they were looking for was inside the boy as they felt her chakra. Finally, they then left the area with their prize in their grasp. The one carrying the boy noticed that he was waking up and used a technique in order to force the boy to sleep more deeply. They moved as fast as they could without looking back as they didn't have time to check if they were being followed. The village was still in an uproar and they had to move through the dark alleys to avoid being spotted, and there were many times that they had to change direction to avoid a group of shinobi. With immense luck, they were able to leave the village walls and deep into the forest. After a few minutes of running through the forest, they determined that they weren't followed and the distraction group had caught up with them. They placed the boy on the ground with one of them running their hand over the boy's body. It was when the hand went over the stomach of the child before they looked up at the others. She is here. Are we able to release her? Possibly. Perhaps we can remove her with our chakra as a sort of lure to bring her out. Let us not waste any time then. The longer we wait, the greater the risk of one of those shinobi coming after us. With a nod, the others circled the sleeping boy and began to use their chakra to get her out. Inside the mindscape, Yusaka was sleeping peacefully in a futon that was constructed inside the mind before her eyes shot open and she sat up quickly. This feeling. Before she could think about it more, she saw that her body was fading from the mindscape. She was panicking as to what was happening till she recognized the feeling of the chakra of some from her village. Are they? No. Minato appeared in the temple and asked what is going on. Yusaka looked at the man and spoke with fear in her voice. I am being removed from Naruto. When she finished saying that, her form completely disappeared from the mindscape. Minato looked around the mindscape to look for any sign of it dying. He would do what he can to keep that from happening, he just needed to see any sign of it first. An orb of glowing white-orange chakra began to grow from the particles that were leaving Naruto's body. Naruto groaned at the feeling of energy leaving him, but he would not be able to wake up from the spell placed on him. Soon there were no more particles coming from the boy and a large orb of chakra floated above the boy. Soon it began to shift and distort as the people watched in anticipation. The orb then took shape into the form of a nine-tailed fox and it gracefully landed on its feet. The fox turned back to the boy and its eyes widened before he began to glow brightly till it was replaced with Yusaka. The group of people saw the woman and they all knelt down as they all announced, "Lady Yusaka." Yusaka, however, was more worried about the boy. "What did you do?" She asked them before she moved to Naruto and gently picked him up to see if he was still alive. She was glad to see that he was still breathing, but she was still worried about the consequences of such a separation. She looked him over and could see that his breathing became heavier. "Lady Yusaka." She turned to the group behind her and glared at them. She wanted to lash out at them, but she knew she had to withhold her anger since she assumed that they didn't know about the consequences of separating her from Naruto. "Are any of you knowledgeable in healing magic?" One of the members stepped forward and bowed. "I am, Lady Yusaka." The other members chose to keep silent as they wanted to know if she was hurt in any way, but they quickly figured that she was asking for the boy she was sealed inside. The fact that she was holding the boy was what tipped them off to that. They didn't know that she was sealed inside the boy and were only doing things in the spur of the moment. The one that picked up the boy simply detected Yusaka's chakra inside the boy and grabbed the boy and took him with them. Even using their chakra was just an assumption as they had no idea if it would work or not. They were just fortunate that it did work. They just wanted to get their leader back as soon as possible. If it didn't work, they would have just taken the boy with them and figure out a way to remove Yusaka from him later on. The member who stepped forward moved closer to the boy and began to run their hand over the boy's face. Yusaka kept her gaze on the boy's face and saw that his expression wasn't changing. She felt worried that he was dying from the separation. "Lady Yusaka." The woman looked to the one healing Naruto with a stern look. She had grown very fond of the boy, and if the one healing him said that he wouldn't be able to do anything, they were going to be punished severely. "What is it?" The one healing the boy pulled their hand away before shifting their head to look at their leader. "There is nothing majorly wrong with the boy." "What?" The person then pointed to the boy. "From what I can tell, he only has a fever and not a very bad one. Just a bit of heating up and should go away on its own. Though I can't really tell if there is anything else wrong with him, but my healing magic is having no effect on him, which tells me that it is just some sickness." Yusaka felt such relief in hearing that the only thing that happened from the separation was that he had gained some cold-like symptoms, but she was still concerned as they couldn't just leave him here in the forest, and going back to the village with him in her arms would bring up many questions. She thought that she could bring him back to the gate for someone to take him back to either his house or the hospital. The group was then brought out of their thoughts when they heard rustling coming from close by. They turned their head when they heard voices coming from the direction. "Can you believe that we actually got this little bitch? For a clan boasting at seeing everything, they sure as hell didn't see us. Think we will get a turn as a reward when she is old enough? First we gotta get back to the village. Once we present this extra boon, the Raikage will reward us with anything we want. I can't wait to be able to breed the Byakugan into my family. With this in our village's grasp, we will soon be able to show off that no other village should mess with Kumo." Yusaka glared in the direction of the voices and was able to piece together a conclusion from what they said. Despite how this was not her village, it was the home of many people that Naruto is fond of. Also, she believed that peaceful alliances between people should be a priority. Unless hostile actions are done against them, they would be peace talks, but she knew that actions need to be done when the time comes. Kill them, but make sure one remains alive to be interrogated. Bring the one kidnapped here. The group nodded before they flew into the trees. The Kumo shinobi were all patting themselves on the back as they had accomplished their council's mission. The meeting with the Hokage and Konoha Council was something that the Raikage wanted to be done so that a potential alliance could be established. However, the Kumo Council had met up with them to say that it would be far more beneficial if they were able to grab one of the main household members of the Hyuga clan. This was the best chance they had since the previous Raikage had been unsuccessful in acquiring one. Now, they had not only a main house member but the heiress of the Hyuga clan. The main representative was a civilian as a way to keep suspicion off them, and the shinobi was his guard. But all of them were privy to the plan. Now they had gotten away with the heiress and they were able to slip away, thanks to a secret passage they were given by one of Konoha's own Chunin. Now they were taking a breather before they began making their way towards Kumo. Before any of them could react, most of the Kumo shinobi were struck through the chest by what looked like three-pronged spears. The representative and the one holding a sack under his arm stood up and panicked as they were not expecting to be ambushed. The representative panicked as he wasn't used to seeing people die. He moved to stand next to the shinobi as a way to protect himself. The Kumo shinobi berated himself for not being alert and thinking that they got away scot-free, one of the biggest mistakes a shinobi could make, and now his men had paid the price. He focused on his surroundings and was able to feel several chakra signatures all around him. Damn it. Put the sack down and you might live to see tomorrow. The shinobi sneered at the forest trees as he tried to find where the voice came from. Screw you. He channeled as much chakra he had into his legs so he could get away, but as he was about to make a move, he suddenly felt a pair of arms wrap around his leg and looked down to see the representative become a sniveling mess. Save me. Please save me. Let go of me, you idiot. If you do that, he didn't get a chance to continue as another spear pierced his shoulder with enough force that he was flung from his spit and then pinned, face first, into a tree. Arg. The sack he had fell to the ground and the representative saw it and picked it up and held it as a shield of sorts. Don't do anything. If you attack me, you will hurt the little bitch in my arms. Being a civilian, he did not see another three-pronged spear coming till it severed his leg. He was confused for a second as he fell to the ground but soon felt the immense pain and threw the sack away and grabbed the stump that used to be his left leg. Ah. Out of the shadows came one of the group members that came for Yusaka and picked up the sack before moving back towards Yusaka. The shinobi glared at the one that was walking away as he saw that their prey was being stolen away from them after they got this far. Get back here, you piece of shit. That little bitch is ours. He tried to remove himself from being pinned, but with how he was pinned, the best way he would be able to get away would be fatal. Unfortunately for him, the choice was made. Another member of the group dropped behind him and grabbed his other arm. She is no longer our concern. The member then pulled the shinobi off the tree, leaving both the spear and arm behind. Normally the members of Yusaka's territory wouldn't be this brutal, but they were a little on edge and wanted to end things quickly so they could escort Lady Yusaka back home. The member looked at the shinobi and saw that he would bleed out soon, and with the objective complete, they left to rejoin Yusaka. The sack was placed in front of Yusaka and she watched as the member opened it up and was shocked to see that they had indeed kidnapped someone. Someone that was around Naruto's age. She flared her power in manager as she thought it was despicable for anyone to kidnap someone so young, and with how they talked about breeding, she wanted to send their souls to be punished in the worst way possible. She immediately calmed down as she saw the girl begin to stir. She began to think that they should take them both back to the village, but paused when she heard something coming their way. She heard it was coming from the direction of the village and figured that it was the Konoha shinobi. Did they sense my chakra or the chakra I felt from the Kumo shinobi? Regardless of what they sensed, she smiled as she knew that both the girl and Naruto would be able to be taken back home. She looked to her escort and spoke. Prepare to leave. The shinobi of the village are coming and I do not want any of us to be seen. The group nodded as they made sure nothing of theirs was left behind. Some went back to retrieve their weapons so they could leave. Yusaka looked down at Naruto and smiled before she gently placed a kiss on his forehead and whispered, "Thank you for everything, Naruto. We will meet again someday." She gently laid the boy next to the girl, who was removed from the sack and laid on top of it. She gently caressed his cheek before she stood up and looked at her escort. Let's go. With that they left the area, leaving the two children laying together. The girl woke up soon after and sat up before looking around in confusion as she had no idea where she was. Where? She then felt her hand brush up on something and turned to see a boy laying next to her. She pulled her hand away in shock as she didn't know who this was. She sat there for a few seconds and saw that he looked like he was sick. She slowly moved closer and pressed her hand on his forehead to feel that he was a little warm. She grew concerned about this and wanted to help him. Looking around, she couldn't find anything that would help, so she used her sleeve to wipe away some of the sweat on his forehead. Lady Hinata. Naruto. Hinata looked back to see her father and uncle running in her direction with many of the Anbu behind them. Father. Hiyashi and Hazashi stopped in front of Hinata and knelt to check her over. Hazashi activated his Byakugan and checked the girl over for any injury. Once that was done, he looked to his brother and said, "I don't see any injury on her, she looks to be in good condition." Hiyashi nodded his thanks to his brother and was about to pick her up to leave, but she shook her head. Hinata pointed to the boy and said, "He is sick." Hiyashi and Hazashi looked to the boy to see that a few Anbu were looking him over. Neko was internally berating herself at the fact that she did not leave more Anbu around the house. This was her fault. Only 30 minutes after she left, she was informed that Naruto had disappeared from his home, and she was so tempted to kill the Anbu she left behind as guards for this failure. She checked him over and felt that he had a fever. She picked him up and was about to take him to the hospital as she wasn't sure what could be wrong with him till another Anbu dropped down in front of her. "Captain, we found the Kumo representative close by with his escort. Most of the escorts save for one are dead and the representative is gravely wounded." Yugo came to the conclusion that they were the ones responsible for kidnapping not only the Hyuga heiress but Naruto as well. Why else would they be nearby? But something else she wanted to know was who was the one that stopped them. Make sure they live long enough to be taken into the T&I department, and someone inform the Hokage that we have found the missing children. I will be taking Naruto to the hospital to be looked over by Lady Tsunade. Hiyashi wanted to go to the Kumo visitors and show them not to mess with the Hyuga, but right now, his daughter took priority. He looked at the Anbu and asked, "Would it be alright if we join you at the hospital? I wish to make sure that nothing is wrong with my daughter." Neko looked at him and nodded. Hiyashi looked to his brother and gave an order, "Inform the Hyuga out there searching that Hinata had been found." Hazashi nodded as he felt relief that Hinata had been found. He would also be able to inform Hitomi that her daughter was safe and will be at the hospital for a checkup. With that, they all went to their appointed tasks. Both Hinata and Naruto were in the same hospital room sleeping in separate beds as Tsunade looked over the results of the scan they got. Kushina was staring at the woman with a small look of anger, but she held it back as Tsunade wasn't the one she was angry at. "How are they?" Tsunade looked up from the chart and smiled. "They are both fine. Hinata was only a little scratched up since I think they wanted her in pristine condition. She really wanted to punch one of the Kumo shinobi for having this thought process, but she right now had a job to do. As for Naruto, it almost looks like he has mild chakra exhaustion, which is surprising since I was unaware that he had even unlocked his chakra." Kushina shook her head. "I hadn't shown him how to since I was waiting for them to enter the academy before I showed them anything, that is if Naruto even wants to enter." Tsunade nodded before looking at his chart. "Well, it might be that he had just unlocked it since I have seen many have this kind of reaction when unlocking it. The rush of energy might have had him accidentally release it all, causing him to end up with a slight fever. This happens to many who have small chakra pools, and at his age, it should be very small." Kushina looked at the sleeping boy and asked, "So he will be okay?" She didn't know about this since Uzumaki tend to have large chakra pools even at a young age. "Yes, all he will need is rest. He should be back to normal in the morning." Kushina sighed in relief as she worried about what had happened to him. She had felt the burst of chakra in the direction the Anbu had run off to and she feared the worst, but there were no signs of the large Kyuubi that attacked years ago, and with Tsunade saying that he would be fine in the morning, told her that it was still sealed inside him. She wanted to check the seal on him, but with how peaceful he was at the moment she didn't want to put more stress on him. Tsunade placed a hand on the woman's shoulder and smiled at her. "He will be fine, Kushina. Now I better inform Hitomi and Hiyashi about their daughter. They are most likely just as anxious as you are. I can feel it coming off in waves from the waiting room." Kushina nodded before moving to Naruto and placing a kiss on his forehead. "Thank Kami, you are safe." She began to make her way out of the room and walked down the hall with Tsunade behind her as she thought about what she would like to do to Kumo for this. And she knew that she had a pair of Kumo citizens to vent her anger on. She nodded at the guards that littered the hallway as she had agents in every corner of the hallway that led to the hospital room. She even knew about the Anbu that were guarding the window as well. Many of them were sensors so they could detect any chakra signatures entering the room. Inside the dark hospital, the two children slept peacefully under the light of the moon. Naruto, however, felt something coming and slowly opened his eyes as he tried to find where it was coming from. His eyelids still felt heavy, but the feeling was getting stronger and it felt familiar and comforting. Suddenly a light began to appear at the foot of his hospital bed. He slowly sat up as the light began to grow and he saw that something was coming from the light, or rather someone. As the light began to die down, he got a good look at the person. It was a woman that could be seen as immensely beautiful. She had long blonde hair that fell well past her rear and had a flower tucked behind her ear. She was wearing an elegant white gown that was lined with gold with red highlights here and there and had a red cross over her stomach. She had no footwear as she seemed to float above the ground. The things that were different from what he had seen before were the 12 angel wings coming from her back and the glowing halo that floated over her head. The woman opened her eyes to show that they were the same blue as Naruto's eyes as they shined brightly in the dimly lit room. She looked towards the boy and took in his features as if it was the most beautiful thing she had seen. Her eyes began to well with tears as a smile came to her face. She floated to hover over the boy as he looked up at her and she reached out her hand towards his cheek. She flinched as her fingertip touched his skin, as if afraid he might disappear, but it then slowly began to caress his cheek. Naruto closed his eyes as he leaned into her touch. He knew this touch. He felt this touch before, but he could not remember from was then that his heart told him who this was. It had been telling him all this time that he would meet her someday, and now the day was here. "My precious baby, I found you, at last, my precious baby boy." Naruto thought her voice was the most precious thing to ever be heard. He opened his eyes as he looked up at her. "Mama." She floated down and picked him up and held him in her arms as his head rested on her breasts. She should thank her brother for informing Michael and her that he had found her son, but right now, mother and son were back together. Thanks for watching.